Imagine, if you will, going to a wedding where the groom doesn't show up. Today, that would be seen as being left at the altar, right? Well, back in 1770, this was being known as being married by proxy, apparently. Because that's what today's story is about. It's a wedding that feels pretty much impossible by modern standards. There's a bride standing ready, dressed for one of the most important days of her entire life. She's surrounded by ceremony, a lot of royalty, and even more expectation. But the groom is not there. This is April 19th of 1770. Inside a grand church in Vienna, Maria Antonia of Austria is married to the future king of France. But instead of standing beside her, the groom is represented by someone else. Her own brother takes his place, acting as a stand-in during their wedding ceremony. This is what happens during a proxy wedding, and while it sounds unusual today, it was a powerful political tool at the time. But this was not a love story. This was diplomacy. And to understand why this happened, we needed to go back and look at the political landscape of Europe at the time. Austria and France had been rivals for generations, but after years of conflict, both sides wanted stability. They wanted peace, and more importantly, they wanted to strengthen their position against other powers like Prussia and Great Britain. So they chose a marriage. Maria Antonia, still very young, was selected to marry Louis Auguste, the Dauphin of France, who would later become King Louis XVI. The arrangement was formalized, negotiated, and finalized long before these two ever even met. And once it was agreed upon, there was no turning back. As part of the process, Maria Antonia had to formally renounce her rights to her Austrian heritage. Then, after the proxy ceremony, she began her journey to France. This was not just a physical journey across land, though. This was a complete transformation of her identity. When she reached the French border, something symbolic and deeply personal took place. She was required to give up everything Austrian. She had to give up her clothes, her possessions, even the small items that connected her to her past. Maria Antonia even had to give up her name, not just in the modern standard way where a lot of women choose to adopt their husband's last name as their own when they get married. She gave up her entire name. She was no longer Maria Antonia. She stepped into a new life as Marie Antoinette, a new name for a new role. When she finally met her husband near the forest of Compiègne, the reality of her situation became clear. These two were two young people brought together not by choice, but by everyone else's expectations. Soon after, they were married again in an official ceremony at the Palace of Versailles, surrounded by luxury and tradition and the weight of an entire nation watching them. The celebrations were grand and the rituals were elaborate, and everything appeared to be exactly as it should be for this young couple. What a beautiful day it was. But beneath the surface, things were quite a bit more complicated. They didn't know each other. These two were strangers. The marriage, which was meant to symbolize unity between two powerful but warring nations, struggled in a way that I guess no one had anticipated, but they should have seen coming. For years, the relationship remained unconsummated. In a royal court where image and perception mattered deeply, this became more than just a private issue. It became a public concern, and whispers spread through Versailles. Speculation grew. Reputations began to suffer. For a union designed to protect strength and stability, this was a quiet but growing problem that no amount of ceremony was going to hide. And that was only part of the challenge. Marie Antoinette also had to navigate the politics of French court, which could be as dangerous as any battlefield and as different as night and day from where she'd come from. One of the most significant tensions involved Madame du Barry, the influential mistress of King Louis XV. Court etiquette required acknowledgement of the mistress, but personal and political pressures made that acknowledgement difficult at best. For a time, Marie Antoinette refused to speak to her at all, creating kind of a situation that threatened diplomatic relationships. Eventually, under pressure from her mother and advisors, she delivered a single carefully measured sentence to satisfy expectations, and it was enough. But it showed just how delicate her position was. Every word that she said mattered. Every action was watched. And after the death of King Louis XV, the new king, her husband, King Louis XVI, removed Madame du Barry from court, which aligned with Marie Antoinette's preferences. But by then, the young queen had already learned an important lesson. Versailles was not just a palace. Versailles was a stage, and every moment was part of a performance. This marriage, which began with a stand-in groom and a ceremony built on political necessity, would go on to become one of the most famous and tragic unions in history. It started as a strategy to bring peace between nations, but it placed an enormous amount of pressure on two individuals who were still growing into their roles and really into themselves. They were just children. And that raises an important question. How much of history is shaped by decisions made that are far above the people who have to live through the decisions that are then made? So I want to hear from you. Do you think this marriage ever had a real chance to succeed, especially knowing what we know now about Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette's end? Or was it destined to struggle from the very beginning because it was built on politics rather than any kind of personal connection? It was common back then. That doesn't make it right. So tell me your thoughts in the comments. I do always enjoy reading your perspectives. And if you enjoy reading stories like this, make sure you follow the Facebook page and subscribe to History Happens podcast so you never miss an episode.